Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have just a couple of announcements as everyone is getting logged in. First, we are recording this session and it will be available here in Excel events for the next 30 days and on Alliance's YouTube channel after that. Secondly, if you have a question during this session, please make sure to use the chat or the Q&A area to the right of your viewing window. And if you'd like to access English or Spanish captions or Spanish audio translation, you'll use the widget below this viewing screen or use the link that we are dropping in the chat right now. And you'll be able to access translation and captions from there. Finally, this is a webinar type of breakout session. The speaker will not be able to see you, but they will be able to see your chat and Q&A comments in the panel on the right. So please feel free to use those throughout the session. It looks like we are ready to go, so I'm going to hand it off to Yolanda.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Yolanda Gordon, and today we are here for dignity-centered storytelling, a framework for trauma-sensitive and inclusive storytelling. And I am a South Carolina native. I was born, raised, and still currently live in South Carolina. Apparently, I'm a unicorn because there are very few of us here. I am a moth-trained storyteller. I am the senior manager of the Results Fellowship, and I have also been a TEDx speaker. I also have lived experience with anti-poverty programs, and I do have 3 adult children, single parent of 3 adult children, and I'm also the dog mom to Esme and Spot. So they've been a little rowdy this afternoon, so I've had to put them away. This session is, well, first, I come to this work with lived experience in anti-poverty programs like SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, and a professional background in advocacy, healthcare, and trauma-informed care. Today, we will explore how to tell stories that honor lived experience, protect emotional safety, and strengthen advocacy impact. This session is both for nonprofit professionals and storytellers who carry real and meaningful experiences of poverty, hunger, disability, and resilience. This is a basic overview. The goal is simple. We center dignity, we avoid harm, we uplift truth with care, and we build stories that serve the person first and mission second. So our learning objectives is we're going to go over public narrative and some applications of that. We are going to understand the principles of dignity-centered and trauma-sensitive storytelling. We are going to gain strategies for preparing storytellers to be comfortable emotionally content in front of audiences. And we are going to talk about reframing deficit narratives into strength-based narratives. So I will not assume that everyone here has experience with storytelling, that everyone here has experience working with someone with lived experience, that everyone here has lived experience, that everyone knows what I am presenting, and that everyone is bored. Social anxiety disorder. So get a little anxious that I'm boring people to death. It's my thing, not yours. So why do we tell stories? We tell stories to bust dangerous and systemic myths. And we also tell stories because they're 22 times more likely to be remembered than facts alone. They empower others to tell their stories. And in advocacy, we cannot assume our members of Congress understand what our experience is. Our stories can connect them to the realities we experience at home. They get data all the time. They do see data, but it's more important for us to tell them our story and what is happening on the ground in our states. So public narrative is the story of self, story of us, story of now. It was created by Marshall Gantz, and it helps people connect their lived experience to community values and shared actions. And it does use the 3 parts, story of self, us, and now. And the story of self is what we are going to focus on because using public narrative is great, but when it comes to telling a story about ourselves as individuals, that first part is the most important. So, story of self is basically, what is your why? What values shape your leadership? What moments reveal who you are? What is your personal motivation? And why do you care about this work? That's also very important, because your why could be totally different from the reason you care about this work. My why is because I have 3 children. I was a single parent, and I knew that my experiences with anti-poverty programs, it was important for other people to hear what I experienced. Because the one thing that I want all of us to remember is that poverty is not one size fits all. So, why does dignity center storytelling matters? So, stories shape the way the public understands poverty. And our society has been spoon fed myths, and many were created before we were born. Stories can influence policy, funding, and public will. Yet, storytelling that I have to find the next page. Here we go. Exposes trauma without consent or care, can hurt the storyteller, and can flatten lived experience into a stereotype. Dignity centered storytelling recognizes that people are the authors of their own stories. It acknowledges power dynamics in nonprofit spaces. It prioritizes informed consent, emotional safety, representation, and that reflects humanity rather than hardship alone. Trauma sensitive storytelling encourages us to create processes that honor recovery and avoid exploitative patterns that reduce people to a problem to be solved. So, storytelling is emotional labor. And when we think about dignity centered storytelling, we have to think about the core principles of choice and control. The storyteller decides what to share, how to share it, and when to step back. Consent is ongoing, it is not a single moment. The one thing that I am bothered by sometimes when I talk to organizations who do story banking is some of them have never thought about what happens if a volunteer is no longer in your grassroots. Do you continue to use their story, or do you just move their story to the side? Or do you continue to get consent from them to use your story? With safety, we have to ask what emotional preparation is needed before sharing and what support is needed after sharing. We avoid questions that force disclosure. So we want to make sure that we are telling a story from a scar and not a wound. And if we come into a situation where we allow the storyteller to know that you are in an emotionally safe space, that allows them to be vulnerable. And you also tell them, share as much as you want or as little as you want. Strength and resilience. When we highlight a storyteller's agency, creativity, survival strategies, and hopes for the future, we help them learn that they have strength, that they are resilient. And poverty is not the story, the person is the story. We name systems that produce harm. Poverty is not a personal failure, it's a policy choice. Stories become tools of change when we connect the individual experience to structural issues. And above all, we treat every experience with respect. We avoid sensational details. We avoid pity-based language. And we speak in person-first, strength-based language. So this is what I appreciate about the way that I work with storytelling with my fellows. So when using trauma sensitive practice, we prepare, support, and avoid harm. So before the story, I ask them what topics do they feel safe talking about and what topics are off limits. I offer them options. Do you want to do a written story? Do you want to write it to me? Do you want to record your voice and send it to me? Do you want to be videoed and have your story used in a video? Or do you just want to give me a quote and allow me to use it anonymously? That gives the person the power to determine how they want to engage. Offer options that are reasonable for folks because, again, not everybody has a computer. Not everybody is capable of recording themselves on video. But there's one thing that I do know is that if you have a smartphone, you can write things by hand and snap a picture of it and text it to someone. And I have taken that information and typed it up for folks and worked with them on it to make sure that their story is what they want it to be. Explain where and how the story will be used. If you're going to use someone's story in a different context, go back and get consent to use it in that different context. It doesn't mean that because they gave you their story that you can continue to use it continuously. Always go and get consent and always let them know that they have the right to change consent at any time. Now, when they're telling their story, use open-ended questions, not pressure. Pause if they get emotional. Give them a moment. Normalize boundaries. That is one thing that I think is very important. I personally have been interviewed by folks who have had zero boundaries and they push instead of waiting for, didn't wait for me to get to the next thing. And those were folks that I let them know they could not use my story because I was not confident in how they were going to portray me in my story. Reflect back strengths and values, not trauma moments. So instead of saying, oh my gosh, you lost your job and you ended up applying for SNAP, say, you showed amazing strength and resilience when this change occurred, and you did what you knew best to feed your family. That is something totally different than just giving them the I'm sorry narrative. And then after the story, debrief with them. Ask them what they need out of the experience. Offer follow-up support. Share final drafts for approval. If you are uncertain about something that your storyteller has said while you're working on this story, reach out to them during that process. That shows that you want to be their partner and that you want them involved in the process. And never use a story without final consent. I have had this occur and I was not happy about it. And again, remember that storytelling is emotional labor. Okay. So let's talk about reframing our stories. So we have from deficit-based to strength-based storytelling. So deficit-based is an approach that frames the story around a problem or need or lack, focusing on what is broken or missing rather than on strengths and assets. This approach can perpetuate harmful stereotypes and victim blaming by suggesting the problems are the result of poor choices rather than systemic issues. Strength-based language is a communication approach that focuses on the individual's abilities, assets, and potential for growth rather than problems or deficits. So here's an example of a deficit-based approach. She struggled to feed her kids and relied on SNAP to survive. Now, if we switch that to a dignity, strength-centered vision, she used SNAP to keep her family stable during a difficult season. Her resourcefulness and commitment to her children guided every choice she made. Reframing shifts the focus from shame to agency. We highlight resilience, not stereotypes. We highlight systems, not personal blame. So, I get asked this question a lot. How do I use graphics without tokenizing, or how do I choose photos without tokenizing? And almost at every conference that I attend and speak at or engage with other individuals, I get asked this question. And I've thought about this long and hard. And I think the best answer is to imagine that it's your story. How would you want to be portrayed? Would you want to be portrayed with strength or weakness? Ask the person you are working with what they want their photo to look like. This makes them a partner. You're giving them choice in how they are portrayed. If you are uncertain about it, what I always go with is I use a stock image. Even if I want to use my storyteller's photo, if I look at that photo and I am uncertain about the photo, I use a stock image. We're just zooming through. So, ethics. I'm an occupational therapy practitioner, so ethics is a big thing for me. Don't turn your storyteller into a subject. Do not turn your storyteller into the focus of the narrative. Keep the attention on the person's experience with the issue being uplifted. When the storyteller stays in a supporting role, the audience can connect more clearly with the purpose and the people at the heart of the story. It humanizes a person. When you treat them as a subject, it does not humanize them at all. It changes the way that the story is shaped. Avoid tokenizing one storyteller as the voice for it all. Again, poverty and hunger does not look the same for everyone. A person's story is not one size fits all. A person in New York City will have a different experience from a person living in rural York, South Carolina. Even though they're using the same programs, they're experiencing poverty, it is totally different. It's not the same. Share the impact of the story with the storyteller. Give them feedback on how people positively receive their stories. Now, we know that there are detractors out there. There are negative Nancy's who are going to say all the things and spread negativity. We see this. We already know that these folks exist. But boost your storyteller's confidence by telling them what the positive feedback is. And trust me, from experience, hearing that someone related to my story or they connected with my story is a huge confidence boost, and it reminds me that I'm doing the right thing. Create feedback loops that allow storytellers to shape how their story is framed and used. Storytellers are your partner. When you work with them as partners, they feel valued. I have flown through this PowerPoint and I said I was going to slow myself down. Okay, so again, this is an overview. It is not in depth. I would love to go into the weeds on this, but I find that when I do that, I get really excited and I talk really, really fast. So if you want to hear more, I am willing to talk about it at length. But dignity-centered storytelling is a practice. It is not a product. It honors the storyteller, strengthens community trust, and creates more authentic advocacy. Your stories have power. They can shift stereotypes, move policymakers, and build a narrative of shared humanity. And they can also help make change. Oh, thank you. So I am going to say I am literally at the end of my presentation, and I welcome questions. There are 37 folks there. I would love to have questions. If not, I don't know what we're going to do. because I'm literally done.
Thanks, Yolanda. Yes, just a reminder, drop those questions in the chat or the Q&A. We can lift those up. And since we have the time, we can feel free to really take our time with these questions and expand and maybe explore some of the content of what you said, Yolanda. So yeah, go ahead and drop those questions in, and we can spend some time continuing to learn.
And also, if you don't have any questions, that's totally fine with me too. I totally appreciate that. I will say that I did create a document that I did drop in Excel events. I got that right. And it's kind of a meeting guide of a meeting style guide. Again, I am not going to say that everyone knows what I'm talking about. I came at this document from my perspective, from having experiences telling stories or being a storyteller around my personal experience with poverty since 2015. And hopefully that document can help just a little bit.
We did get a couple of questions, so I'll go ahead and read these, and then you can take it from there, Yolanda. Minerva asks, what's the best way for us to help prepare storytellers?
So remind them that they're in control. I think that's one thing that is often missing. And I will say that when I started my journey as a storyteller, I was never told that I was in control. I was just excited that someone wanted to hear my story. Also, let them know they don't have to expose all the parts of them. They can keep parts of them to themselves. They don't have to tell you them. They don't have to tell you everything about their experience. You can also work with them on how they want to be portrayed. I am a person that I will tell everyone I'm fluent in several languages, and two of them are Southern and sarcasm. So please, if you think someone's being sarcastic, absolutely check with them to make sure they are not being serious. Because I have said things that have been sarcastic, and those things have popped up in a story. And the person did not realize that it was indeed sarcasm. So always check and make sure that what you're getting is actually what they mean.
Wonderful. I've got one more in the Q&A, and then it looks like some are coming through in the chat, so I'll get to those in a moment. But Karen asks, some organizations would like to compensate their storytellers with money. Can you speak to the upsides and downsides of this?
So again, storytelling is emotional labor. You should always pay your storytellers. You should always keep in mind that they are providing you with their time and their energy. So compensate them just like you would compensate any other contractor for doing work. So I honestly have never found a downside to paying storytellers or paying someone to spend time with you to talk about their experiences. Because in many situations, if they're willing to work with you, they do appreciate if you're compensating them for that time. And it doesn't just feel like they're just giving something away, that you actually respect their time and their energy, and you want to make sure that they are compensated for the time that they spend with you.
All right, so back into the chat, some questions that have come in. Where did the stat of remembering a story 22 times more likely than just a statistic?
So that actually came from public narrative, from the author himself. Don't quote me on this because I read this a long, long time ago. But I can give an example of when I have personally had that happen. 3 years ago, I went to Lindsey Graham's office to talk about housing, housing cost, and to talk about affordability and SNAP. And I had my iPad and I opened up a listing for a house for rent in my community, actually right across the street from my house. And I showed them how much it cost, which was $3,000 to rent the house, just the house, no utilities, no cable, no nothing. And to this day, every time I talk to them about housing, they bring up that advertisement that I showed them on Zillow of the house for rent for $3,000. So they didn't remember any other information I gave them about housing, housing affordability. They remembered me telling them the cost of housing. So I wish I had written down where that actually is. Um, but I do know that it came from the creator of Public Narrative himself.
Great. Another question in the comments here or in the chat. Would you mind sharing another example of reframing the narrative, kind of before and after the reframe?
Okay, reframing the narrative. So, some examples. I can use my personal experience on this. I talked to Tim Scott's office a lot about the earned income tax credit for years. And of course, they have their talking points, we have ours. And this one young man's talking point at that particular time was, well, if you get married, you will not have financial difficulties. And in that moment, it didn't take me by surprise, but instead of, I was sarcastic with my response, but I framed it as people who experience poverty can be married. You can be married and experience poverty at the same time. I was married in the military and we required SNAP to feed ourselves. Also, married people get the earned income tax credit. So I reframed his thought process that if you just get married, you can solve all your problems into this is the reality. This is what people experience. And yes, you can live in poverty and be married. Marriage does not solve that problem. One other thing about reframing the narrative is avoiding language that seems negative. So, like I used the word struggled. To me, that can be perceived as a negative to some folks. So, using words like she used SNAP, not she struggled, because to me that sounds like it is her problem that she needed SNAP. That is not a systemic issue. So the only job she could find was working at Burger King for $7.25 an hour. Even though she has skills and is resilient, the employment she was able to find was at minimum wage. So that changes it from she could only do this to she has skills, she's resilient, minimum wage. So it takes the view off of the only thing she's able to do is this, and saying she has skills, she is resilient, but she could only find a job at minimum wage. So that I often tell people, put yourself in that position. How would you want someone to talk about you? And if you write a sentence and you put I struggled and you don't like how that sounds, change it around and go from a position of power in your mind about yourself.
Great. We had another one come in the Q&A, and I think there's still a few more in the chat. I'll come back to those. But we had someone ask, what do you think is the most challenging part of storytelling, and what tips do you have to ensure the safety and well-being of individuals who share their personal stories?
The most challenging part about telling your story is being vulnerable. Um, it doesn't matter if your challenge was yesterday or if it was 10 years ago. It is still something that affected you deeply. And we have to remember that poverty and hunger, that is 1,000 little traumas every day. So every time you apply for a benefit and you meet a case manager who is very negative, I even had a case manager tell me once, I know you have a man living in your house. Like, do you know how that feels hearing that when you're trying to be vulnerable with someone and tell them what you need? So the hardest part of storytelling is being vulnerable. Um, the number one thing I will say about ensuring safety, let the person lead. You have questions, you give them the questions beforehand and you let them lead. You let them help craft those questions. If they read a question, say, you know what, I really don't like this question. Say, well, you know what, can we revise it together? That way you're making them partner. You're asking them to help you do this. And any story turns out much better when you're partnering with someone instead of just viewing them as someone who's telling you their experience.
All right, another question from our chat. Would you please share an example of what it looks like to make a storyteller the subject?
Yeah, I can. So, I watch a lot of documentaries, right? And I love ones about weather. It's just a thing. But in these documentaries, you hear about the storm, right? Hurricane Matthew. You hear about Hurricane Matthew. The people who experience Hurricane Matthew are in the background. They're the subject. The storm is the priority. So if you're talking to someone and you're focusing solely on this one thing that happened in their life, for example, I was unemployed, I needed SNAP. Well, tell me about unemployment instead of saying, tell me how that experience affected you. You take it from focusing on the thing that occurred to asking them, how did you deal with this? How did you overcome this? How did you work through this? Always have them at the center of what you're doing. And if you do this with them in mind, they are not the subject. Another example, and I don't know if you guys remember this, maybe I'm old, but there was a National Geographic with a beautiful girl on it with the most beautiful blue eyes. She was the subject in that picture because people remember her in the blue eyes. They don't remember her story. So that's kind of the view that I get when I think about a subject, that you're observing that person, you're not listening actively to that person, you're not partnering with that person.
Wonderful. I think I've captured everything, but let me check the chat one more time. Let's see.
And I'm going to drop my email address in the chat. If you want to ask me questions, if you want to just shoot the breeze, if you just want to talk about anything, I'm Southern. I can talk about just about anything. Or if you want to go deeper into storytelling, if you want to go deeper into trauma and trauma informed storytelling, by all means, reach out to me. We can chat, and look forward to hearing you guys. And thank you, Minerva. I have really enjoyed working with you guys too. And the work that you do is very important. And the work that everyone else does in this space is very important. Even though we are seeing the negatives of what is going on with this administration, the one thing that gives me hope is that there are people like us that are out there fighting the good fight. And as I tell my fellows, because I love analogies, in order for bread to rise using yeast, it has to be in the darkness. So think about that in terms of movements. Movements are born in the dark. And we are just one large movement in the dark, working through this darkness and getting this work done. So I appreciate everyone for the work that you do.
Wonderful. We had one question come through that might be a nice way to wrap everything up, but someone is wondering, what is your favorite example of storytelling well done?
Oh my gosh. It would be John Lewis's last words. That would be an example of storytelling well done. Just thinking about the resilience that it took to write that, knowing he was coming to the end of his days. And then if you find the video, Morgan Freeman reading his words makes it so much more impactful. That is storytelling well done.
All right, well, we are just a few minutes ahead. So last call for any final questions, or if I did happen to miss you, maybe just repost it in the chat here and I can see that real quick. But yes, thank you, Yolanda, so much for this incredible message and training. Excuse my dog there. He's ready to go outside.
And also, if you want to go to YouTube and look up my TEDx, it is called Poverty Pandemic. And this was 2 years after COVID that I did this TEDx. So feel free to check that out.
Wonderful. All right, well, I'll go ahead and wrap us up here. Thank you, Yolanda, again so much for your message. Up next, with an additional 6 minutes, so about 21 minutes, there's going to be a little bit of a break. So be sure to check out the on-demand content or visit the sponsors' exhibitor booths. And we'll see you back here at about 3:45 Eastern for your choice of the next 3 sessions. To join these 3 sessions, click Agenda in your navigation bar to the left of your screen, and then be sure to click the right arrow to scroll through all of the available sessions. That concludes our time today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.